All right, so we're going to attempt to edit this photo and restore it of my mom and dad. And I did a video quite a few years ago using a very old version of Photoshop that is on my YouTube channel. And this is going to be the update for it because there's been lots of new features in Photoshop. And of course, I've learned how to do things a little bit better as well. Step one, always duplicate your background, of course, so that we don't destroy anything that is going to be on that original background so that we can get it back. And you can see that this photo, when it was scanned, it's got some white edges on it. So we want to remove those first. So I'm going to start by cropping this photo down and making sure that I remove them. Now you can decide if you wanted to just have the photo in there. I actually quite like the idea that it tells me when this photo was taken, which was in January of 1959, so a long time ago. So I'm going to leave that border around the outside edge. And it doesn't quite do it perfectly because of the rounded corners on it, but it is close enough. And since I've made a change to it, I'm going to save my file at this point. Remember, you want to save as. You can put it back into your same spot, but you might want to call this, edit, just so you know that you're in progress with it. And that will be a Photoshop document at this point in time because I've already created a layer. So I'm going to start with the levels adjustment layer. Now remember, if you do it as an adjustment layer here through your levels command, then this is creating its own layer. It's an adjustment layer. And so therefore you could go back into it and make more changes to it later if you wanted to. It's non-destructive versus if you go up here into layer and you do your adjustment layer through there, then this is still an adjustment layer. So you'd want to do it that way. You would not want to do it here through image adjustments, as this is a permanent adjustment. You can't get back into it afterwards. So you don't want to do any of those through there. We want to do it here. We're going to go to levels. Now, I know that his shirt is probably white. So I could actually grab my white point here and I could click on his shirt, and that did a huge change already to it. Now it's overdone, it's too bright, but remember, we can always fade this a little bit, and we can make some fine adjustments to it. So I also know that his suit is black. So I'm going to take my black point here and I'm going to click on his suit. And you can see right now that photo is massively improved. The color balance is way better on it. They're too bright, the people. So I could just now try and maybe change those midtones a little bit and just bring back a little bit more texture in their faces. And we can work on them a little bit more afterwards as well. So that's a great adjustment so far. So the thing with photo restoration is there's a lot of playing around because you've got a lot of adjustments, and different adjustments work for different kinds of photos because of the different colors that are in them. So this next one, I can tell that they're very overexposed, especially on the faces, and you can see his shirt and her dress is very overexposed. So I'm going to do an exposure adjustment next. So I'm going to go into that adjustment, and exposure is this one. And I'm just going to underexpose it a tiny little bit. So I'm just going to drag it down. And now this is working on the whole photo. So you have to, kind of remember that you're looking at the overall picture. You don't want to, get their faces down too much and then the background doesn't look good. But you can see I can pull down that exposure just a little bit. And if you play with your gamma correction and you move it in the opposite direction, you can see that I'm just bringing back a little bit of texture. Now, again, when you do these adjustments, remember, a little goes a long ways. And so you don't want to overdo anything ever, because you can add more later if you need to. Okay, so that's the exposure. And now I'm going to go back to adjustments again. And now I'm going to do what we call curves. And curves is where it takes a look at the different colors in the image. And you can adjust now your black tones, your midtones, and your highlights separately. And you can also do it by separate channels too. So I could do just the reds, the greens, or the blues, or I could do an overall adjustment on the RGB. So this is a very powerful adjustment layer that is built into Photoshop. Generally what you want to do is you want to create a couple of points on this line. And so clicking the line, you can see that I can now just move my black tones so that they're a little bit brighter. So this is down in the bottoms. This is my, kind of shadows that are in there, and they're a little bit brighter. And I'm going to take these midtones and I'm just going to bring them down a little bit. And look at how I just brought back that texture in their faces a little bit. Now, you can wreck curves pretty easily. You never want to have a downhill curve, and you never want to have a flat line. So you have to be very careful and just small adjustments when you're in here doing it. And that's pretty good for the curves right now because again, I'm adjusting overall on the whole photo. I'm going to do a save at this point. So I want to show you color balance. And color balance adjustment is this one with the little wave scales on it. Now, color balance adjustment, again, this is doing it globally on the whole photo for now. We can make these adjustments later on to just individual pieces of it by masking. So my color balance right now, I'm going to start with my shadows. All right. And so in my shadows, which would be his suit, the dark greens of the tree, I'm just going to take those shadows, and his hair is looking a little bit red. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of the red out of it and just pull those down a little bit. And I might just add a little bit more yellow into those shadows. So the color of the tree is kind of changing. I'm actually going to go blue because I happen to know that that house had a turquoise wall. The outside of that house that they lived in also had a turquoise on the outside. In fact, I took my dad past that house just a couple of summers ago, and the outside of the house looks identical. It still has the turquoise on the outside of it, and they haven't lived in that house since oh gosh, I don't even know how long it's been. Like, I'm guessing they haven't lived in that house since, mid 60s, right? When they probably moved out of that house. So next thing, midtones. Let's go to those midtones. And again, you can just play with those sliders and see what you think. Now, you don't want to make them green. So I'm going to add a little bit more pink into their faces and maybe put a little bit more magenta into it just to bring back a little bit of, I'm not liking that color at all. So you see, sometimes it doesn't work just to put a bit. And what happens if I go a little bit blue? No, it doesn't work. And then do your highlights. So like I said, this is a real playing around to see what's happening with your tones as to what direction you want to go to try and bring out the colors. Now, color balance before, after, well, maybe it's a little bit improved on there. So I'm going to keep that by saving again. All right, so time to work with just the people. So you could cut them out, of course, and put them on their own layer, and then you could add adjustment layers to that and clip them to the layer, or you can add global adjustments and you can do some masking for it. So I'm gonna start by adding another color balance to it. All right, so go across to my adjustments and I'm gonna add another color balance. And this time I wanna do it just on the people. So don't look at the background. Just look at the people, all right? Again, I'm going to start with my shadows, warm them up a little bit. You're not taking a look at the background at all. You're just looking at the people. And then I'm going to do my midtones. And just get a little bit more red into there. And I'll do my highlights. It's finicky. And let's see if that made an improvement to the people or not. Before, after, before, after. Yeah, I think it's a little bit warmer on there. Now, we just want that done to the people though. So what I need to do is, because this actually is a mask, I am going to go ahead and get a black brush. And I'm going to use a nice big brush. And I'm going to use a fairly soft brush because I do want a little bit of blurring at the edges. So now what we can do is I can just mask all the way around it. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to mask the whole darn thing with black. You could have done that by just filling that with black. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my brush to white, and I'm going to just paint over top of the pieces that I know are the person. And you'll see that this is going to affect then, of course, just the color on the dress and the color on their faces. So in we go. Now you're going to have to be fairly accurate here because you don't want to miss any of their faces and you don't want to kind of miss in the edges of the hair. So I'm going to do a color around it like so. You might have to get in with a small brush. Like I'm kind of doing this fast because I don't want to make this video an hour long following me through the whole thing. If you want to kind of check it, you can check it by going control and clicking on there, and you can see where I've kind of got that softness of the brush on there, and I missed this little piece in the center. I'll just deselect, get back in there, and maybe I won't make my brush quite as soft so that I can just come a little closer to my edges where I can see is happening. All right, so fast forward, pretend that I've just done a really good selection on that whole piece and I've made sure that it's good. Now, if I wanted to, with that color balance, remember, if I double click, whoops, what did I do? Cancel that. If I go on my color balance and I go back over here to the scale, remember, I can make more adjustments now, and you see it's just affecting my people, right? So I can make them a little bit warmer, however I need to on that piece of it. So at that point, you can go ahead and play around with this a little bit longer and see if you can pull out a little bit more texture in my mom's face and her dress. It's very overblown in the original photo, so it's going to be hard to be able to pull that texture back out of it. And then once you have got it to the point where you're liking your colors, now we can go and do a little bit of healing on it. So this is a good time to do a merge layer. The shortcut, remember, is a Control, Shift, Alt, and an E. That will create a merge layer on top. And then I'm just going to call this the color correction. So remember, if I wanted to go back and do more color correcting, these layers down here now, the merge layer is hiding them. So I would have to get rid of that merge layer and I would have to go back and do all that fixing. So you want to make sure that you've got it pretty close to the way you want it before you do that merge layer. Now at this point, I'm going to do some healing. So let me duplicate that layer. It's always great to duplicate before you do some healing. And I'm just going to grab my spot healing brush and I'm just going to get rid of some of these pieces that are over here by clicking. And spot healing, you can drag over top of these creases that are on the picture and you can just heal a little bit of it. Now, don't try and get it, too perfect, but there are some white dots and some noise that you can actually heal. We don't want to use the denoise filter because this is a very old picture and that denoise filter is going to introduce a blur into it. And we don't want to blur their faces or that kind of a thing. Now we could sharpen just parts of it and we could just denoise parts of it as well. So you could go and do a denoise filter on, say, just the background, and then we could sharpen a little bit on the people. So I'm just going to show you quickly how we would go about doing that. I would go up into my filter and under noise, I've got this dust and scratches. And so I would zoom into a spot where you can really see some dust and scratches that are on there, like maybe here on his suit. You can see, I need to see if that's dust on my screen or if that is actually dust and scratches. Let's go down over here. Okay, so we've got some dust and scratches going on in this area and I can increase it. And you see, it's getting rid of those dust and scratches, but look at how blurry the photo has become by increasing that radius too much. So you can't do it by much if you're going to do it. You can click and hold and there's a before and there's an after, a before and an after, which doesn't appear to be working. Let's see, is it working? Before and after. No, it's not working. Oh, it is. There we go, before and after. It's working in the little preview screen is where it's working. So don't do it too much. Yeah, see, I think 2 is about all you can do for pixels on this particular image. And then, of course, if you turn your threshold levels up, you can see what that does to it as well. And it creates a little bit too much blur going around the edges. I'm just fiddling. I really don't know what I'm doing here. And so preview, before, after. I'm going to say okay. Now, if that got too much blur on the people, remember you can add a mask to that layer. And then I can reveal again, or sorry, I can hide. So I would go to my brush and black is concealing. And now I could hide the dust and scratches, especially probably over their faces because we don't want the blur happening on there. And so you could go and you could paint over top of the people in order to bring back the clarity that you had there. right? You could also do sharpening in the same way, or you can do the sharpening like we did in class on our portrait edit before.